The holiday season, so let's get back to our review. Yes, so again, the plot for Underworld. For generations, a secret war had raged between vampires and lycans, an ancient species of werewolf. After years of fighting between the two enemy races, the vampire have seemingly gained the upper hand following the death of the lycan leader Lucian at the hands of the vampire named Craven, who subsequently became the second in command to the vampire's leading elders. Selene, a member of the elite group of vampire assassins known as Death Dealers, longs for the revenge against the Lycans who murdered her parents who when she was a child. Now, it takes so many twists and turns. It's a very interesting film in the sense that up until this point we haven't really seen a leading lady as a vampire. Most of our vampire movies are all centered around men. Blade, right? Count Dracula, Nosferatu. But the fact that a woman would lead, and it be as action packed and sleek as this film was, I thought it was truly wonderful to watch. Very, revenge movie and woman empowerment at the same time. And it's funny because the first movie really doesn't. There's sexual tension, but there's never really any instances of any sex scenes. Like it's there between her and her leading beau, who is gorgeous. I mean, this is Scott Speedman, and I mentioned him in You, and I think I mentioned it in the previous video. But he was coming off of Felicity, and so he was the cat's meow. So, but it was a great movie, and it would go on to do a sequel and a prequel and whatnot. But the first movie is always the best, and not for nothing. At least I remember that was the issue. It wasn't really an issue because there weren't that kind of couple, and I didn't even know there were a couple. So Kate Beckinsale, who plays Selene, she's the head of the vampires, who was playing up against Michael Sheen, who played Lucian, who was the leading one of the leading elders for the Lycans, the werewolves. But in real life, either were going through a divorce or were divorced at this time. So isn't that interesting to see this dynamic? Although honestly, the movie played out flawlessly, and if you didn't know this piece of information, would it really affect the movie? But it's interesting when you know background to a story and you're kind of like, oh, so you start looking at certain details a little more closer when you're watching. But nonetheless, it is a great Halloween themed movie. If you want to hear that thunderous roar of rain and whatnot, stormy night, which is always ideal for Halloween background. So again, if you're having a Halloween movie or you just want to binge, view it today on video on demand. So on to the next. Wow. I love this movie. I know a lot of people have their opinions on this movie. It's not really a vampire movie. It's kind of a goofy movie. It's it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the predecessor to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the series. I fell in love with this scene in particular because the song is just remarkable. The song is called Little Heaven, and it's by Toad and the Wet Sprocket. But for me, like, that scene just was everything, you know. And at that point in my life, at that point, Luke Perry, who plays Pike in this movie. He was coming. Well, he was still filming 90210. It's such a heartthrob, my God. So it just made me fall in love with the movie even more. Yeah, and you know, unfortunately, we lost Luke. I think pre COVID. Um, but he's such a staple when it comes to like my childhood, because those were the programs that like built us, you know, at least people in my age bracket, they built us, you know. And so he was the James Dean of our generation, and he would be sorely missed, but we have his films and his legacy of work to always remember him by. So oh man, it's heartbreaking to kind of even watch the scene now, but I recommend it if you wanna remember his incredible body of work.
You're not like other girls.
I love this song. Please watch it. Available on video on demand. Speaking of hotties, now this is the trailer you're hearing for The Lost Boys. This is a cult classic. This is what you think of when you think of vampires, which is not for nothing. This movie would go and influence, would go on and influence creator and I believe executive producer and I believe showrunner for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the series, Josh Whedon. The Lost Boys was the first of its kind, even though there have been a lot of vampire movies, but up until that point, nothing as fresh and innovative for that time. Even even with the mullets, they were new, and even down to the way they made the guys look very much menacing with in terms of the fangs. Now, the fangs technically would be like on your canine teeth, like you see here. But they wanted to switch it up for the Lost Boys, so they put it closer to your two front teeth, which made it very, like, I remember as a kid, I was like, this is odd looking, because the placement usually is by here, and I still, well, I hated it because it was traumatizing, and I thought they looked like killer bunnies, but nonetheless, kudos to the makeup team for the time being, because it would be synonymous with pop culture. It would influence, other creators like Josh Whedon, and if you notice in the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when they would turn vampire, the placement of the teeth would be in the same, and it kind of mirrored the same aesthetic with the Lost Boys. So, but speaking of hotties, I mean, do we remember the hot guys? This movie? For heaven's sake, I mean, we had Jason Patrick, Corey Haim, all the Coreys, but he was rather relatively young. But we had Kiefer Sutherland, Kiefer Hatney with that blonde, which is it's funny because he didn't. I mean, again, you can YouTube this, but according to the rumor mill, he wasn't even pleased with that blonde. It was kind of like a fluke thing, and they just kind of ran with it. And to this day, when you think of the Lost Boys, you think of that like cut, that and that platinum blonde, spiky hair. But it's such a great cult classic. You need to see it. Now, in case you haven't seen it, here's a quick plot. Michael Emerson and his younger brother Sam travel with their recently divorced mother Lucy to the small beach of Santa Clara, which, from what I also gather when they filmed, that place doesn't even exist. I guess because people where they were shooting, it's closely related to that name, but they didn't want to be attached to like, yeah, anything that had to do with crimes or murders. So so for purposes of the movie, they had to change it to another name, Santa Clara, which does not exist, California, to live with their eccentric father, referred to as simply as Grandpa. Michael and Sam begin hanging out on the boardwalk, which is plastered with flyers of missing people. This is why, see, they didn't want the real town where they shot, they didn't want this. So that's why they had to change it. While Lucy gets a job at a video store run by bachelor Max Lawrence, Michael becomes fascinated by Star, beautiful young woman he spots on the boardwalk, though she seems to be in a relationship with the mysterious David, the leader of the young biker gang. Check this out.
Initiation's over, Michael. It's time to join the club.
That's it. It was so scary as all hell when I saw this as a kid. I couldn't sleep. And the eyes, bro, bro. You gotta watch it though. And I'm sorry if you try to remake this. Just know people are gonna come for you. They'll probably rip out your teeth. Because if you get this wrong, you're done for. People love this movie too much.
If you see a kid that's riding a bike 2 sizes too big for him, that's his little man trying to save the neighborhood. And speaking of saving the neighborhood, what's up with all these missing person flyers? Yo.
Speaking of influencing, like I mentioned, how Lost Boys would influence Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, we also have a fresh perspective to the Lost Boys via Latinos, new spin to the cult classic with Vampires versus the Bronx. Now, it's not the same story, but more or less the same premise, and a multi-ethnic cast, which I appreciate. And it sort of follows the same story. We have a Sam and the Frog Brothers and everything of the sort. Very young, precocious, smart young men that for some reason have studied horror films and know how to best combat the evil that are the vampires in the neighborhood. And the real enemy for this film is more or less gentrification. But again, same premise. Bodies just start missing. And it played into the social climate that we see now on Instagram and on the news and whatnot, and how sometimes, if you're a person of color, it's not investigated. But if you're the alternative, it gets media coverage from here to Timbuktu. Nonetheless, Vampires vs. the Bronx is a 2020 American comedy horror available on Netflix. Filmed by Oz Rodriguez, very talented writer. Written, yes, Vampires vs. the Bronx follows a group of teenagers who are forced to protect their neighborhood in the Bronx when a gathering of vampires invades. It stars Jaden Madden, Gerald W. Jones III, Gregory Diaz IV, Sarah Gadon. Method Man was amazing in this movie, not for nothing. He got some acting chops, like, seriously. And Coco Jones. It was released October 2nd to 2020. While getting their nails done in the Bronx. Oh, and Zoe Saldana, too. She does a quick cameo. New resident Vivian learns from salon owner Becky, she plays the salon owner, Zoe does, that Becky will be selling her salon to real estate group Myrna Properties, who have been buying up land all over the neighborhood after Vivian leaves MoMA, broker Frank Pelodry comes to finalize the sale and watches as a vampire kills Becky. And it's just a number of these things. And what I love about these vampire movies is that one movie will like change the recipe, change the outcome. What you would assume is how to best combat the villain, they'll come up with some new way. And for them in this movie, as opposed to, you know, the traditional, the crosses and whatnot, but they come up with garlic adobo as their protective shield. And I thought that was just incredibly hysterical and funny and relatable, especially to a Latin community that mostly that is a staple in most of our meals. So yes, I highly suggest you watch Vampires versus the Bronx, available on Netflix.
Hey, driver.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's play a game. What would you do?
Now, speaking of multi-ethnic cast, this is fresh and innovative, also available on Netflix. Night Thief. I already reviewed it, and I will link that review in the description box below. But this is a fresh perspective